Hey guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws here again with another exclusive interview. Today we're asking the question, is the shark from Jaws a classic movie monster? And to help me answer that question, we're joined by Faith Roswell. The reason Faith is with us is because she is the author of an incredible new book called Movie Monsters of the Deep. The book is out today. We're going to be talking about Faith's new book soon, but please welcome Faith Roswell to the show.
Hi everyone, good to be here.
Oh, Faith, thank you so much for taking some time out. Obviously, your new book's come out today, and you've been really sort of busy with sort of various media commitments, which all sound sort of super exciting. And we will definitely talk about the book in a moment. But the first question is Jaws. Now, this is one of the greatest movies ever made. It redefined the movie industry in so many different ways. And you've written this book about the various movie monsters. Now, the question that I want to know is Jaws a movie monster?
I think so. I think whereas now a lot of shark movies, they're very careful to make the shark appear a bit more normal, like a normal shark would appear. At the time, the way that the shark acts is more like a slasher movie villain rather than a real life animal. And so, although I don't think that sharks themselves are monsters, I definitely think that in Jaws, this one was written to act like a monster. This one was a monster, I think.
Mm. I kind of agree with you on it. I think, the first thing that we notice about the shark is its size and power. It's hinted at, in various moments throughout the movie before the fantastic reveal of the bigger boat moment. And then it's coming towards the boat, and Hooper and Quint are like, that's a 20-footer, that's a 25, 3 tons. I mean, this is a monster shark in terms of size, but also some of its behavior. It's also a very, as Quint says, it's a smart, big fish. And we seem to find that monsters in certain movies, they don't just have this brute force or this harsh exterior or this physicalization. There is something else going on inside a lot of them. What do you think makes a great movie monster?
I think definitely the fear factor. There's a lot more out there in terms of creatures that are scarier when you really think about it than a shark. More people die of bee stings and mosquitoes and even the little creatures that you can't see, microbes and things. But at the end of the we don't you don't have to think about that when you think about what is a scary monster. You think teeth, you think claws. So I think some kind of looking at it and going, ugh, is a must, really.
Mm.
Even the ones that look fluffy and fuzzy. The one that's just come into my brain is the vampire Pomeranian from Blade 3, or is it 2? I think it's 3, where he's this cute little dog and then his face just goes.
Mm.
And so I think there's got to be a fear factor in the way it looks, something that either scares you or you go, oh, that's really disgusting. And then knowing that it could am I allowed to swear? It could fuck you up. Can I say that?
Yeah, go on then.
Okay, all right. I allowed one swear. Okay, does that make things PG? Is that the PG allowance one swear? Okay. No. Okay.
Although a lot of people argue that the real monster in Jaws is Mayor Vaughn or even maybe the townspeople. But that's probably a conversation for another time. Um, Tell us about when you first saw Jaws. What do you remember about that experience?
So I started watching horror or sci-fi thrillers at a fairly young age with my mum, and I actually think she introduced me to that kind of movie in a very safe, very nice way. Like we had a lot of talks about special effects. And she's telling me about, well, let's watch this. There might be a bit of raspberry jam involved at X amount of times. So as a child, I'm like, oh yeah, I know how that happens. Oh, I know how they did that. So we were watching it, and of course there were the terrifying bits. I still jump to this very day at the head under the boat bit and the head coming out
Mhm.
of the water. We're going to need a bigger boat. But
Yeah.
at the same time, she took great pains to point out this rubbery hinging jaw and the way that its mouth moves. When you look at it again, you think that's that looks a bit ridiculous. And so I have this memory of fear. It was scary, but also really funny. Like I got the fun out of it, and I think that's still how I feel about monster movies to this day. There's a lot that is scary, like and some of the old werewolf movies and Creature from the Black Lagoon, but there's also some that you just think that's actually really funny. There's a guy in a fish suit and he's flippity flapping on the land, and yeah.
There have been some absolutely classic monster movies, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I think was 1954, if I'm remembering. Someone's probably going to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. You look at some of those underwater sequences, and you can see the influence that they've sort of had on Jaws, and Jaws has obviously gone on to become a very influential movie as well. Um, where do you think the shark from Jaws kind of ranks in the movie monsters? Is he sort of bottom of the league table? Is he mid tier? Is he top of the tree? Where do you kind of think he ranks?
I think really pretty much top of the tree because he's so memorable. Like there's got to be plenty of people in I don't know, Gen Alpha, young kids now who have never heard of Creature from the Black Lagoon, but everyone's heard of Jaws. And so there's something that is memorable. The same with Godzilla is another one that I think ranks that high level, because even if you've never ever seen Jaws, you've never seen Godzilla, you know roughly what it's about, even if you don't know the kind of the nuance behind it. Anyone you say Jaws, and everyone goes dun, 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 and you know it. So I think that memorability, that's that's huge. That's really huge.
Yeah. I was in an interview I did with Wendy Benchley earlier this year. We were talking about Jaws and how it's one of the most deceptive marketing campaigns ever, because on all of the posters, it's got the shark, and in all of the trailers, it's got the music. So you think you're going to get lots and lots of shark. And the shark is in your mind literally from the first sort of couple of minutes, obviously, after Chrissy has gone swimming. Um, but you only see the shark for maybe 4 or 5 minutes on actual screen, but it's in our imaginations, and I think that's the key to the secret of the storytelling or part of the storytelling for Jaws. And I think it does make him very, very memorable because it's reliant on our imaginations to create the shark for most of the movie until we kind of really start to get to see it towards the end, and by then we're projecting our own thoughts, feelings, fears, and everything else onto it. So I like the fact that you've mentioned that it's memorable because it is, but because we've helped create that memorable experience for ourselves. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride, but we're kind of driving it at the same time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think that's the thing with a lot of movie monsters that people do remember, that they don't necessarily, you think they're on screen for far longer than they are. I mean, Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs as Hannibal Lecter was on the screen for a fraction of the film, but that's all. Even if you only seen the film once, you remember Hannibal Lecter. That's the person you know. If you've
Mm.
seen a film called Annihilation, which has Natalie Portman, it's a science fiction film involving these women that go, the military and scientist women that go missing. If you've seen the film only once, what you remember is the bear, and that bear monster is terrifying.
Yeah.
And that, if for something to make that level of an impact that it defines an entire film, even when it's barely on screen, is that's an achievement. I really think.
Mm. What do you think makes us so fascinated with movie monsters?
I think there's a combination of the knowledge that it really does happen, that an animal attack, as much as animals act like animals and they are not monsters. They say, what's normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. Well, what's normal for the shark or the lion or the something is chaos and hell for the
Mhm.
victim. And I think we all there's not victims. Sorry, and we went back on serial killers for a second. But like for the little human, the prey, we're always going to be afraid, even if we understand the animal, even if we know that this animal is not going to hurt you because they want to do you harm.
Mm.
We are prey. And I think with movie monsters, especially ones that are based on a real life animal, it's almost satisfying that morbid curiosity. What is it actually like to be hunted by something like this
Mm.
without actually being hunted by this thing?
Mm.
I think
It,
it's a combination of making it fun, making it entertainment, managing that fear, but in a way that you're not actually in danger.
I think it's a really good point. And there was I did a conversation with Andre Gower a couple of years ago. He's He's the in the lead cast member from the Monster Squad, which is an absolutely fantastic movie. If you haven't seen the Monster Squad, people, please just find a copy of it somewhere. You've got Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, the Mummy, Wolfman. I think that's all of them against a group of kids, basically in a town. It's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant. And I was lucky enough to speak to Andre, and we started talking about monster movies. And he made a really, really good point. He said that with Jaws, you've got actually for the second half, you could actually argue it's a survival movie because you've got the shark trying to survive Quentin Hooper and Brody, and vice versa. So then all of a sudden it gives everything a brand new dynamic, and the shark, rather than just swim away, decides to go on the offensive to take out this territorial threat potentially, because territoriality is something that's flagged quite early on in the movie in the movie Jaws by the shark expert Hooper, played by Dreyfus. So I think the thing that fascinates me about monster movies is there are so many different ways to look at them, and also they can bring a lot of different meanings, I think, as well. And obviously, metaphors are quite strong in movies, and symbolisms and things like that. And the way you look at different monsters can can have a different impact on the way that you kind of view the story, or your own life. For example, one of my favorites, um, I guess it's a monster movie, but it's more of a sort of sci-fi alien movie, is The Thing, the 1982 remake by John Carpenter. And the reason I like it so much is because, again, the monster isn't really on screen that much, and the monster is man, and it's about trust and betrayal and the truth, and things like that, and it generates sort of paranoia and all of these things, and you're sitting there thinking, "My God, like, what would I do in that situation?" And I think that's ultimately what any good storyteller is going to try and do: hold a mirror up to us and go, "Well, this is what these characters are doing, but what would you do?" And I think that's again what kind of really great storytellers like Steven Spielberg and John Carpenter and all of those guys, they have a really great way of asking that question, or in creative ways. And I think monsters are a great facilitator to do that.
Absolutely, yes. Although that just reminded me of this random little fact I learned. There's I read an article about horror movies and monster movies that if the characters knew this one thing, the whole movie would have changed. If they had spoken, I think it's Norwegian, if they'd spoken Norwegian or whatever the language that the person in the helicopter is yelling, uh, they would have known that they're saying, "Don't let it in. It's not a dog. It's a monster. It's not a dog." And the movie would have ended right there.
That's absolutely, you know what? That's a great point, because a little while ago on social media, we asked the question, if Chrissy hadn't gone swimming, would we have even had a story? Because would the shark have just passed by? Or was the shark determined to kind of be in that area? And then again, that sort of whole theory around territoriality. So it was just a matter of time. What happened? But that's a fantastic point about The Thing. God, I'm gonna have to rewatch that now.
Haven't verified that one yet, but I remember the scene and I do not speak Norwegian, so someone must do, and someone must be able to verify that.
We'll put it out to the
Yeah,
Norwegian followers of the Daily Jaws. Tell us the answer to that question, because that's actually a very good point. Although maybe if we put on subtitles, I may have to screenshot the subtitles. You know what? I'm going to do that after this interview. Oh, you've got me thinking now. Oh, okay. Anyway, um,
brilliant.
so with Jaws, what do you think is the secret to its longevity? Because the thing about it being a monster movie, it's really interesting because it's almost genreless, but also it fits into almost every genre you can think of, obviously apart from a Western or something like that. But it can be a thriller, it can be a horror, it can be a monster movie, it can be a drama, it can be a chase movie, it could be a survival movie. There are just so many different genres it can attach itself to. So what do you think is the secret to this movie's sort of longevity? Because next year we're 50, it's the 50th anniversary.
I think it's several different points. Number one is the story is extremely simple. Like Shark, this is the core storyline is actually very simple to follow. So I think that's you can explain what happens to everyone, even though there's lots and lots of different nuances, and you can start to really imagine it and talk about it from all these different angles. Big shark in town, everybody starts arguing about how to deal with it.
Hmm.
And that's usually enough to get people interested in talking about it. But then there's so many different ways to talk about it. There's so many different talking points. So what seems like it's a very, very simple story actually gets people having these huge, great debates. So I think that's the first one. It
Mm,
feels simple, but there's lots to say. The other one is it's because it's not really about a shark. There's more than the surface level of it's about a shark and it's scaring people.
mm,
So there's that. And I think in a way, like I'm not in favor of demonizing sharks. I think the way that we are making different films now and treating sharks differently is a good thing. But at the same time, they've used such creative license that they could have gone anywhere. They have created
mm,
this genuinely terrifying thing. So I think that's in one level, a lot of the shark movies now that are very forgettable, there's only so much you can do with a shark that's acting like a shark. So
mm,
you have to have these people that always seem to have the exact same problems. He's cheating on her, she doesn't want to tell him this, there's an issue with her dad, something something wants to make them proud.
mm,
Whereas with Jaws, it's it's such a different storyline that's not really been replicated properly, or it's not been improved upon.
mm.
Must have been quite a rambling answer. Sorry about that, but I
No.
think that's part of what the secret is of the longevity. Is you could literally ramble on and on and on and on about all the different angles that are in the movie.
It's a great answer because I think you're right. I mean, Jaws is, as you say, it's a very simple plot, and the story is multi-layered. It's very different from the book,
Mm.
and I think they streamlined it in the right way, and they put the focus on the right characters for the right length of time. And I think it's really a story about, everyone has a shark in their life at some point, and do you have what it takes to do the right thing? And we see that transition with Brody, particularly when at the beginning of the movie, he's very duty bound and he doesn't really want to rock the boat or make waves or whatever. So he kind of goes along with the mayor and the medical examiner and all of those things because he could just see the shitstorm that's coming, but it doesn't solve the problem. It's like that really famous meme where they've got the band-aid and they or the bit of gaffer tape and they put it over that big massive tank that's about to erupt. You've ultimately got to get in and fix the problem properly, and Brody should have followed his instincts, I think. And again, I think that's what all of the great sort of movies kind of do. And like you say, with the shark movies post Jaws, because to be honest, and the sequels, I think to a degree, obviously Jaws 2 isn't too bad with this, but Jaws 3D and Jaws The Revenge, it's almost an unrefreshable idea. It's a story. Potentially, it is a story about a fish, but the secret to Jaws is that it's not about a fish. It's about something very, very different. And there's so many different ways to watch Jaws. And like, for example, one of my favorite ways to watch Jaws is almost like from the point of view of Quint, because when I first saw Jaws, and I remember it vividly, I didn't trust Quint at all. I didn't trust him at all. But then when you get to
Mm.
the end of the movie and then you understand why he is the way that he is, quite standoffish, isolated, vengeful, hateful towards sharks, and he's chosen this particular profession, you go back and watch Jaws again with that in mind, and it completely changes your experience of that character. And a lot of that is down to the genius of Robert Shaw, obviously, and Spielberg. Um, so I think Jaws is one of those multi-layered monster movies, but not many people actually understand that. And it's not about the shark. It shouldn't be about the monster. It's about how the monster challenges the characters, how it changes them, and how they have some kind of character arc rather than just being dead meat for a monster to gobble. Although probably my, I don't know if it's my second favorite monster movie, but it's very, very high, is another monster of the deep, and it's Lake Placid. I
I love Lake Placid so much.
I
Yeah.
adore that film. I absolutely adore it. I mean, one of the first things is that it's very economical. I think it's something like an hour and 20 minutes, maybe an hour and 25. And it knows what it is. It's really tongue in cheek. It's really funny. You've got some fantastic performances, and they're not trying to make Jaws again. They've learnt lessons from Jaws in how they deal with the monster and the gore and the gradual reveal, which is fantastic. But they've let the characters drive the story, and it's very clear how each of these characters are being affected by these people, by this situation, and by the monster. And it kind of got in and got out quickly. It didn't need to drag things out. And then you kind of got the other side of the scale where you've got things like Sharknadoes of this world, which is just a crazy idea. I mean, I absolutely, when I first heard about it, I'm like, Sharknado. And I'll tell you a really funny story. This is a very brief one. I remember I went around to my nan's house and I put on Sharknado 2. And she was like, "What's a Sharknado?" I said, "Oh, don't worry about it." And I knew she was going to hate it. And literally in the first 60 seconds, I think it is, there's a scene with the lead actor, Ian Ziering, I think it is. He's sitting
Yeah.
on a plane and a shark goes flying past the window of the plane while it's 30,000 feet up in the air. And my nan was like, "Was that a shark?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Is it in a tornado?" "Yeah." She goes, Turn it off." That was it. That literally is as far as we got. But the thing is,
That's
that's what happens. But that's kind of what happens when you push this idea that it's the shark. So how far can we push that and break through the realms of plausibility and realism? And therefore you get into farce and gore and all that. And it's sort of like, the not the black sheep of the family, but like the I don't know, like the unusual eccentric cousin of Jaws. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, but then it's almost like a natural rebirth. But then you see other shark movies that do try and stick to the formula. So, for example, like one of my favorites, I would say, sort of direct Jaws legacy movies is The Shallows. It's another shark movie with Blake Lively, and I think it comes back to your point about it's a very simple premise, very simple setup. Yeah, there's some peripheral stuff around family and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately it's a duel between her and her shark, and that physical manifestation of challenge and disaster or whatever you want to call it. And also the shot looked pretty damn cool as well. It was a nice mixture of practical and CGI to make that happen. And it worked. It worked really, really well. So I think for me personally, I still think there's life in the shark movie genre, and I think Jaws is, we've got a lot to thank Jaws for that. But it's always about the right filmmaker, the right storyteller, getting the right idea or the right story and executing that correctly. I mean, we're talking 50 years, well, technically 49 years on since Jaws, and there have been a few shark movies before Jaws. But where might you like to see the shark movie genre kind of go? Or do you think we've exhausted it now? There's nowhere else for it to go.
I'm a big fan of the Silly Shark movie, but I think one of the things about the Silly Shark movie is you've already got to be a fan of shark movies, understanding those first. So I know a fair amount of slasher movies. That's it's not my favorite thing, but I know the tropes, I know the characters. I once watched The Cabin in the Woods with my mum, and I thought she'd probably like that because she's not a fan of the sort of real torture, full gore horror. But because she's not seen the old slasher movies, she treated The Cabin in the Woods like a serious film because she doesn't know the background. She's not seeing the particular tropes and the harbinger of doom and all that that's making me laugh,
Mm,
because for her this is new. So I think one of the things about the Silly Shark movie is it's already, you've got to be a fan of the shark movie or understand a shark movie first, and then you can appreciate the silliness because you know what's already come before. So
mm,
I think that's silly shark movies tend to be, I think, for someone that's already a big fan. And I think with a silly shark movie, you can go anywhere. You can go literally anywhere. And one of
yeah.
my favorite ridiculous ones is actually called Bad CGI Sharks. And
Yes.
it's
Yes. Yes.
two
Yes.
brothers,
Brilliant.
one with the stupidest man bun known to man, who are being stalked and hunted by the bad CGI shark creation of the shark movie that they started trying to write many years ago. It is the most meta thing, and the memorable scene that kills me every time is this shark that's coming up behind this guy. It's bad CGI, and it keeps pausing to buffer. And this guy's taking a photo of himself on Snapchat, and both him and the shark end up with flower crowns on the puppy dog. It kills me every single time
That
because
is,
these guys, I mean, I mentioned this film in my book. I actually give it a fairly, I think, pretty positive review. I've got a little review guide in the back, but I'll tell you about that
mm,
later. But I think that bit was just cracking me up. And the guys made it with a budget of just under $6,000. And they said,
wow.
look, yeah, they said, look, we don't have the money for an excellent CGI shark, so we might as well make a bad one and put all the effort and all the time and all the production into a story.
Mm,
And even now, after I think I estimated it's something like 250 shark movies out there, they made something new.
yeah.
And I think that's proof that it can be done.
Mm.
I think with the scary shark movies, there's still obviously there's still there's always room for things because there's always a demand.
Mm,
But I think they're slightly hamstrung by having to, quite rightly so, make sure that we think of the shark as a shark and an animal and not a monster.
mm. Yeah, this is the thing because I think Jaws sort of brought sharks to the public imagination in a way that they'd never been brought before, and it was the first sort of impression that people had, or a lot of people sort of had of sharks before we then started to learn more. And one of the legacies of Jaws that I think is fascinating is there's a lot of people that went into filmmaking because of Jaws and have gone on to make great stuff. There have been people that have actually gone into shark conservation or studying sharks or the oceans is because it's generated that sort of fascination. But there is a group of people that are still, yeah, a little bit frightened of sharks as well. But I think a lot of that is not necessarily on Jaws. I think it's this perpetuation of what the media kind of does whenever, I mean, the classic one here, because obviously you and I are both from the UK, whenever anything that resembles a shark fin is seen within 5 miles of the UK coastline.
Uh,
Oh my God, it's a great white shark. Jaws is visiting the UK, and you're just like, oh my God, it's a basking shark. What's wrong with you? Or sometimes it's a
yeah,
dolphin. But luckily, we've got some really good experts that can help us sort of rebuttal those rumors and put people straight.
good old
Um,
shark bite. I remember that video that he Christian did a great little video about the
yeah,
R sharks in the UK and very yeah very
yeah.
informative.
Hi, Christian, if you're watching, by the way. Christian Parton, he is a shark expert who works with us quite regularly, and he has a YouTube channel called Shark Bites. So if anyone's interested in learning about sharks, check him out on YouTube. He's fantastic. Okay, so before we come to the book, I've got a couple of questions. One of them I'm going to throw in. So he's going to ask you to think on your feet. But the first question before we get to the last one is obviously, as we know, Jaws is going to be 50 next year. What are you hoping to see for a Jaws 50th anniversary celebration or whatever?
Big old party. I want to know everything that I didn't know about Jaws. I want to know more opinions about like we were discussing earlier that there's this core plot that everyone knows, but then there's so much else you could talk about it. There's so many other angles. I want to know people's opinions. I want to know more about the legacy of Jaws. I want to know like, okay, this movie is 50, but okay, what are people doing now that still go back to Jaws? I want to know more
Yeah,
about that.
awesome. I like the sound of that. And the last question that I'm throwing in, this is a question that I ask a lot, and I love asking this question because the answer is always different. We've obviously talked about Jaws being, not just an example of a great shark movie, monster movie, but it's also just a great example of fantastic storytelling. Uh, if you were in charge of the Jaws franchise and you were the one that was going to create the next Jaws movie, Jaws 5, or whatever you want to call it, what would be your 60-second elevator pitch for a new Jaws movie?
Oh my god, I expect it's a cop out to say the Muppets, isn't it? All right.
That would be good.
Okay. I'm a massive fan of of psychology. I'm a big fan of human psychology and the way people behave. It's like serial killers and psychopaths and all that kind of thing. I'm fascinated by that kind of thing. I I know that the field of animatronics has become extremely convincing based on, Deep Blue Sea and the sharks animatronics in Shark Night 3D. I would go with a Jaws obsessional fan who has created an animatronic shark who is hunting people down in the ocean. And unlike in Jaws, where the mayor is trying to convince everybody that it's not a shark and nothing's going on, I would rather have the townsfolk or the mayor or people in charge trying to convince everyone that it's just a shark, it's just a shark, it's just an animal, and have some absolute badass in town going, this is a human and we're going to hunt them down.
I like that idea. Oh my god. Okay, hang on a minute.
So directors,
I've got Spielberg on speed dial. Hang on a minute. I'm gonna give him a call after
directors,
this.
that is my idea. If you want it,
I will.
you can talk to me about it, and I will play the doorknob if you will if you will cast me in it. I will play an oar. I will play the life raft.
Absolutely.
Just
Oh
let
my
me.
god. I I tell you, if I ever get the chance to cameo in a shark movie of some sort, I'd love to be a victim. I'd love to get bitten in half or something. I'd love that.
Really, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, the other thing we need to talk about is this fantastic new book that you've created, Movie Monsters of the Deep. Tell us about it.
All right, so I originally had pitched an idea about the history of shark movies, and I was told that sounds great, but maybe that's a little niche. How would you feel about expanding your focus to the entire ocean and all the cryptids within? And I went, bring it on. I love a challenge. So I'm a huge fan of shark movies. That's my sort of original passion. But I almost became a paranormal investigator, and I'm very into cryptozoology, so cryptids, and especially the water. So I did have a lot of pockets of what I thought was useless information, and I decided, okay, let's do this. So I thought, well, I don't just want to make a movie guide because anyone can tell you what they think of movies. I want to look at questions like, are mermaids sea monsters? What is the what animals right now should there be in monster movies? What hasn't had its chance to shine and what is overdone? I wanted to talk about these silly shark movies that people tend to overlook and say, well, which ones are actually way better than they had any right to be? And
Mm.
I've always said bad CGI sharks. I also have very strong opinions on Shark Night 3D that I can absolutely go into sometime. I mean, it's I can elaborate, and that is a threat. So I wanted to talk about as well things like the old cryptids. Where did these theories come from? Which ones haven't been talked about? Like the Australian bunyip that's apparently preys on women and children that go too close to the billabong and things. So I did a lot of research. I spent much more money than I'd like to think about in Starbucks, mainlining coffee, and looking into all these different things. And what I created was this. This is my book.
Hey, hold that
And
up so we can all see it. Let's have a look. That's
let's
a
turn it
beautiful
on.
cover. I really like that. Very nice.
So, I mean, do you want me to read the back? I can read the blurb. Just a little bit of.
You
Do you want me to
read the
read the blurb?
blurb. Give us some blurb.
Right. We got. Is there a shark movie that's scarier than Jaws? What is the sneaky secret hidden in the Loch Ness Monster's name? How did the Gill Man in Creature from the Black Lagoon become a romantic hero? Do mermaids count as sea monsters? What terrifying sea creature was discovered to really exist? And just what on earth is a globster? From Kraken to Kaiju, open water to the shallows, monsters of the deep have fascinated and horrified us for centuries. If you ever wanted to know your crocodile from your Cthulhu and find out how they make the monsters come alive, whether you like your monsters in the ocean or in lakes, based on real animals or totally made up, fins, tentacles, one head or five, if you love your movie monsters of the deep, then this book was meant for you.
Wow, fantastic. That sounds great. And where can people pick up a copy?
So if you're in the UK, it's available in WH Smith, which is one of our like main bookstores, but it's also available pretty much anywhere on Amazon. It's available through my publisher, Pen and Sword, who I must mention now and thank profusely because this is my first book and they took a chance on this weirdly passionate sea monster movie shark nerd and said, let's let her roll with this insane idea and have made me officially a nerd. So thank you to Pen and Sword. But yes, it's available through their website as well. So pretty much anywhere you can think of, you can get it.
Fantastic. Well, what I'll do is I'll put a link to the to Amazon, to WH Smith, to the publisher, so people can basically buy it kind of wherever they want. I'm assuming it's the same price no matter where they buy it, but hopefully people will pick up a
I,
copy. So, Faith Roswell, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Jaws today to talk about movie monsters, monsters of the deep, shark movies, and obviously Jaws. It's customary for me to leave the final word with the guests. So, are there any final words of movie monster wisdom you'd like to impart on our audience before you disappear beneath the surface?
I mean, I've got a fair amount of horror movie wisdom. Never ever read the Latin. There we go. I think that's
Yes, good shout. Never read the Latin. Faith, thank you so much again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Guys, I've been Ross for the Daily Jaw, speaking with Faith Roswell, author of Movie Monsters of the Deep. And until next time, I'll drink to your legs and I'll bid you a fond farewell and adieu.